Now, before I start the video, I have one serious question. Which phone is better, the iPhone 15 Pro or the Galaxy S23 Ultra? Now, the Galaxy S23 Ultra and iPhone 15 Pro are two phones that have a lot in common, while also still having many differences that ultimately made me pick a side. They both have amazing hardware complemented with a signature look. They both have top-tier displays that are smooth and filled with great resolution. Both have good batteries that complement their size, and both are really at the top of their game in 2023. And even looking at them from an individual standpoint, there are some things that each phone was better at. The iPhone 15 Pro has a better and smoother ecosystem, more software updates which results in longevity, and arguably the best camera in the game. And the S23 Ultra had many valuable advantages as well. It has more features all across the board, it has a signature S Pen, and it has the best display that I've seen this year. So even though both of these phones have many things that they're good at, they both had their downsides when it came to many different things. And in this video, I'll be looking at what each phone has to offer and ultimately which phone is better. So I will be comparing both based on 5 different categories, starting with display, battery, software, speakers, and last but not least, cameras. Now looking at display, the Galaxy S23 Ultra has a 6.8-inch dynamic AMOLED display, and the iPhone 15 Pro has a 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR display, and I must say that both are very impressive. The combination of brightness, resolution, color, and sharpness makes each stand out, but the S23 Ultra being bigger makes the viewing experience that much better. Whenever I was scrolling through the S23 Ultra and 15 Pro, everything looked nice. The S23 Ultra had this very sharp, fast feel, while the 15 Pro had this smooth, slower feel, and I had no complaints about the overall feel of both phones. I will say that based on my personal preference, the S23 Ultra's fast feel is much better. It's very sleek, fast, and gets to the point, and I really like that. Both phones have bezels that are extremely small. Even giving them a side-by-side comparison, it's really hard to rate which phone has a better screen real estate, but I will give it to the S23 Ultra since it's bigger and also has a hole punch camera cutout instead of the iPhone's dynamic island that takes up more space. And now when it comes to brightness, the S23 Ultra is at 1750 nits and the 15 Pro is at 2000, which is really good when you're using both in real life. The 15 Pro was definitely brighter. Another thing that I realized is that the 15 Pro's whites were more rich, while the S23 Ultra gives off a much more cooler tone. Security was pretty good on both phones, but I do prefer the S23 Ultra. I will admit that the 15 Pro has better facial recognition, but the S23 Ultra has many more ways to unlock your phone, so I had to give it the edge. Now the resolution and viewing experience of the S23 Ultra and 15 Pro is extremely comparable because both phones look phenomenal. And looking at them side by side, something that I noticed was that the S23 Ultra's colors are cleaner, the sharpening was much more apparent, and the 15 Pro's resolution was a little bit worse, but honestly, it really isn't that deep since most of you guys, and even I, couldn't tell them apart till I put them together. And then when it comes to gaming, both phones were evenly matched. I love how they both handle power-heavy games, and I was very satisfied with both, but again, I'm going to go with the S23 Ultra since the viewing experience is much better. Now the last thing that I wanted to point out within the displays is the frame. The 15 Pro has a more rounded, smaller display, while the S23 Ultra has a boxier yet bigger screen, and I like the S23 Ultra much more even if the screens were the same size. Now looking at battery, the S23 Ultra has a 5000 mAh battery compared to the 15 Pro's 3200 mAh battery, and even though there's a major difference on the spec sheet, both were able to give me really good battery life. And to give you guys my battery disclaimer, I do not cut corners when it comes to battery. I always have 5G on, my always on display is always on, my brightness is always medium to high, and I do not use power saving mode. And with moderate to heavy usage, I'm usually getting over 8 to 9 hours of screen time a day on my S23 Ultra and 5 to 6 hours on my 15 Pro, and I only charge both phones when I go to sleep. And when it comes to battery, the only phone that I feel could possibly beat the S23 Ultra is the iPhone 15 Pro Max series. I also tried heavy gaming on both phones, and I pretty much got better results on my S23 Ultra, 5 to 6 hours of screen time compared to the 15 Pro's 3 to 4, and this was before I had to charge it again. And the game that I was playing was Asphalt 9. And if I could give you guys a quick estimate, I would say that my battery on the S23 Ultra is about 20 to 25% more when compared to the 15 Pro's battery, but if you want a battery that will last you all day, you really can't go wrong with either. And now the last thing that I wanted to touch on when it came to battery was the charging. I used a 45 watt fast charger for my S23 Ultra and a 30 watt fast charger for my 15 Pro, and my phone was able to charge from 0 to 100% in under an hour with the S23 Ultra, and with the 15 Pro, it would take a little longer, but both really didn't have me waiting too long. Now looking at software, the S23 Ultra supports Android 13 and is also supported by One UI 5.1. The 15 Pro is on iOS 17, and so far in terms of features alone, the S23 Ultra is winning in this category. And when it comes to software features and capabilities, it's genuinely personal preference. The iPhone has better social media integration, FaceTime, iMessage in a very simplistic style, and the S23 Ultra has more features, more customization, and a more advanced feel. feel. So it really all depends on which experience that you want. The always on display on the S23 Ultra was much more customizable than my 15 Pro. I like using social media on my iPhone more. I like answering calls and emails on my S23 Ultra, and I love the different built-in apps that each software had to offer. And in terms of software sleekness, they both work really well together. Scrolling through each OS felt effortless, and I hope my 15 Pro can stay like this for a long time, just like my S23 Ultra. I also decided to test out some games on the S23 Ultra and 15 Pro. I play Asphalt 9, which is a game that can really test out the chip, and as you can see, both held up very well, and I didn't get any lags while playing. And now the final thing that I wanted to note was that the S23 Ultra will be getting 4 years worth of software upgrades, while the 15 Pro gives 5 to 6 years, so when it comes to longevity, the 15 Pro will last a little bit longer. And now when it comes to speakers, both the S23 Ultra and 15 Pro had really good volume, good bass, and were both well respected for what they could offer. And in terms of quality, they're pretty much the same. Both speakers had good bass, the sound quality is good, and they're both loud, so I had no complaints. And right here, I'm going to give you guys an idea of how each of the speakers sound. Now when it comes to camera, the Galaxy S23 Ultra has a 200 megapixel main camera, along with a 10 megapixel telephoto and periscope telephoto, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide, and the iPhone 15 Pro has a 48 megapixel main camera, along with a 12 megapixel telephoto, ultra wide, and selfie camera. And I will admit that I personally prefer the iPhone 15 Pro. And now starting with zoom modes, both phones had a couple of different zoom modes. The S23 Ultra definitely had more, and I will give it the edge in that. The 15 Pro only goes up to 15 times zoom, while the S23 Ultra goes up to 100. And even when comparing the same zoom photos, the S23 Ultra had more zoom, but also gave great quality. The shutter speed on the 15 Pro is better. I decided to test this out by shooting a moving car, and as you can see, the 15 Pro was not only able to get more shots, but it was also able to get them very clean, while the S23 Ultra took less shots. Now looking at outside photos, the selfies on the S23 Ultra were good, but couldn't capture my skin tone as well as the 15 Pro. I definitely prefer taking selfies on my 15 Pro. Also, the sharpness on my face was a little bit less on the 15 Pro, which I like. I also took some photos of random street objects, the sky, and different aspects of nature, and I can honestly say that both phones held up really well in these environments. And the 15 Pro and S23 Ultra fared very well. Now taking a look at inside photos, both phones were able to capture everything very nice, but again, the edge goes to the 15 Pro since my skin tone looked a little bit better, the blur was a little bit cleaner, and the sharpening was at a minimum. And now when it comes to shooting video, both phones were really great, but I will say that based on my use with each, the 15 Pro is better. And the main reason that I do believe that the S23 Ultra does lose in this category is because when I take videos, I can tell that I took it with a smartphone, but with the 15 Pro, it's much harder to tell. Both phones had really good stabilization, so it was ultimately a tie for me. But again, since the 15 Pro has better video quality, I will give it the slight edge over the S23 Ultra. Also, here are some extra videos that I was able to get with the S23 Ultra and 15 Pro Max. So here's the final question. Which phone is better? Well, I personally think that the S23 Ultra is the much better phone. It has a better battery, smoother experience, better display, and a bunch of other things that I prefer more. Now the 15 Pro is a really great phone, don't get me wrong, but it really doesn't compare even though it's already top tier. But there it is, you guys. The iPhone 15 Pro versus the Galaxy S23 Ultra. Now let me know down in the comments below, which phone do you prefer? And again, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'm going to see you guys on the next one. Peace.